With Avengers Endgame now in cinemas and potentially in line to become the highest grossing movie of all time, the 22-film Infinity Saga has finally been completed, giving fans a hugely satisfying and emotional farewell to some of the MCU's top-line heroes. But while Endgame has released to some of the strongest reviews in the history of the superhero genre, it's only inevitable that fans will compare it to last year's Avengers Infinity War. It's fair to say that the two superhero tentpoles are very different films, even if they do cover many of the same characters and narrative through lines. And don't get me wrong, they're both some of the MCU's best, but when the snap dust has settled and the hype evaporates faster than Spider-Man in Iron Man's arms, one has to take the edge over the other. If you haven't seen Endgame yet, I've got to warn you that there are spoilers in this video, but without further ado, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and this is Avengers Infinity War versus Avengers Endgame. Which is better? Number 11, direction. Both Infinity War and Endgame are, of course, directed by Anthony and Joe Russo, and there's a clear tonal and stylistic consistency across the movies that makes this a tough battle to win. On the one hand, Infinity War is a more snappily paced and cleanly focused movie with such a grand sense of scale and dread, but Endgame is a far more demanding film from a technical perspective, requiring the brothers to juggle a mind-boggling number of moving parts while still delivering earned character moments. It's an extremely close call, but Endgame barely clinches it, largely due to the absurd level of ambition throughout and also the impressiveness with which the Russos make that beefy 3-hour runtime speed by. That's not easily done, no matter how much audiences love these characters. Number 10, narrative. Infinity War tells a far simpler story than its big brother, simple enough that it allows the film to effectively become a Thanos character study, for the most part anyway, culminating in his devastating victory. By comparison, Endgame is extremely complex, weaving a logic-stretching time travel plot which naturally climaxes with the heroes mounting their all-encompassing last stand against the Mad Titan. Both movies upended expectations in satisfying ways as well, with one making the most of its grim potential, while the other launched off to become a crowd-pleasing showcase for incredible fan service. Infinity War definitely had an easier job, but it also feels more successful overall. Endgame certainly raises the scope and the stakes, but it's also a little bit bloated in part, and it's easy to get caught up on the time travel shenanigans. That's not to deny how satisfying Endgame was overall, but Infinity War's more streamlined and focused story ultimately felt a little bit more watertight. Number 9, the heroes. In terms of the treatment of the MCU's superheroes, Infinity War and Endgame are very much two sides of the same coin. Infinity War largely pushes the OG Avengers to the background, with Captain America, Black Widow and the Hulk all having small roles and Hawkeye not being there at all, while the likes of the Guardians and Spidey have more time to shine. Endgame flips this by having the newer breed turn to dust for 85% of the runtime, while serving instead as a farewell to the original 6. Though they're basically side A and side B of the same incredible album, only one can win. And novel as it is to see all these heroes interacting for the first time in Infinity War, Endgame clinches it on the merits of its heightened emotion of paying off over a decade of build-up and giving Iron Man in particular an extremely satisfying send-off. Number 8, the villain. Infinity War does an outstanding job of finally living up to over 5 years of anticipation for Thanos, thanks in part to the sharp writing and incredible performance from Josh Brolin as the Mad Titan, instantly making him one of the greatest superhero villains ever. If Infinity War was more Thanos' movie than the heroes', then Endgame is the exact opposite, relegating Thanos to a smaller role and one where he surprisingly killed early on, only to be replaced by a 2014 version of the character for the remainder of the runtime. Consequently, it's a no-brainer that Infinity comes out on top, but this is clearly by design. Infinity War delved deep into Thanos' characterization and devoted much of its runtime to quiet, dialogue-driven scenes centered around him, while Endgame kept his chatter to a minimum and mostly focused on him as a physical threat rather than anything else. The key difference, however, is that Thanos in Endgame wouldn't be particularly interesting without being informed by everything we first saw in Infinity War. Number 7, performances. One of the Russos' most consistent qualities is their ability to garner exceptional performances from their epic ensemble casts, and that's certainly true in both Infinity War and Endgame. The centerpiece of Infinity War is unquestionably Josh Brolin as Thanos, who dashed away years of bland characterization in a single scene. On the superhero side of things, Chris Hemsworth basically steals the show with his strongest MCU work yet, and Tom Holland broke all of our hearts with his devastating final scene in particular. If the bulk of Infinity War is far more of an action movie than anything else, Endgame is focused more closely on drama following the snap, and as such gives most of the cast, especially the OG Avengers, more flavourful dramatic meat to chew on. So no complaints either way really, but Endgame gives the core Avengers lineup some of the most affecting material to date, and the film's overall more dramatic tenor simply gives it more opportunities to let the actors, actually act. Infinity War is more crafted around a single fantastic performance, while Endgame gives audiences several who also happen to be much beloved heroes that they've been following for years. Number 6, visuals. Both movies are undeniably visual spectacles, making the most of their colossal budgets to give audiences a superhero showcase unlike anything else. Infinity War is a visually dynamic film which ventures from leafy New York to the eerie pallor of Vormir to Titan's barren wasteland and of course back to Wakanda. Endgame inherently feels a little less imaginative stylistically because it's revisiting many locations we've seen before, even though it certainly makes great use of them. It's also fair to say that the final battle could have taken place in a slightly more interesting location than a murky digital battlefield compared to Titan especially, which actually felt like a tactile place. Both movies look grand, there's no doubt about that, and there's no real loser hero, but Infinity War pops that bit more throughout its runtime, and has the advantage of coming first. Endgame's CGI in particular, meanwhile, feels a little bit less precise, even if Endgame does have one of the MCU's finest images with Cap facing down with Thanos' army. Number 5, music. The brilliant Alan Silvestri composed the scores for both movies, and he's one of the few MCU composers to bring a decent amount of personality to the table, having been responsible for crafting the Avengers' iconic theme. Infinity War's score features several distinctive tracks in addition to the expected orchestral bombast, especially I Feel You when Scarlet Witch destroys Vision, and the haunting string piece Porch, which plays out as Thanos presides over his job well done. It's a tough act to follow, but Silvestri pulls it off in Endgame, which opts for a more playful score for the most part, especially during the time heist sequence, which features a number of brilliant nods to Silvestri's own score for Back to the Future, because how could he resist in a movie like this? And of course, the Avengers theme itself is brilliantly reincorporated into the film, to say nothing of that soul-rending score that accompanies Tony Stark's funeral. Both are unique and distinctive, but Endgame probably takes the W even if it's for portals alone. Number 4, humor. Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely have proven themselves to be the most consistent screenwriters across the entire MCU, managing to deftly blend comedy and pathos better than even the mighty Joss Whedon. They've got a penchant for penning witty dialogue, but knowing when to pull the laughs back and focus squarely on the drama. Infinity War, for instance, was absolutely jam-packed with one-liners both hilarious, I am Steve Rogers, and savagely iconic, perfectly balanced as all things should be. It's fair to say that Endgame was more focused on crowd-pleasing callbacks and references, but the script was still rife with plenty of humour, especially in Thor and the Hulk. Infinity War certainly benefits from having firmly embedded itself in meme culture over the last year, but its dialogue is also more memorable and effective on the whole, while Endgame is focused on creating memorable moments above all else. Endgame may have surprised audiences with Korg calling a 15-year-old gamer a dickhead, but nothing in that film quite left audiences reeling like, why is Gamora? Number 3, emotional impact. If it's a frequently cited complaint that the MCU lacks tangible stakes, and as a result the potential emotional investment in the story and characters is undermined, Infinity War and Endgame clearly sought to change that. Infinity War features a number of shocking death scenes which hit the audience straight in the gut, while firmly establishing Thanos as a potent villain. There's such a pervasive sense of dread your first time through, with the Russos making you feel like anything could happen. And although there was never any doubt that the Dusted Avengers would return, the devastation of seeing so many beloved heroes temporarily disintegrated nevertheless hit fans hard. Endgame was meanwhile mounted as the climax to the Infinity Saga and served as a thoroughly poignant send-off for the longest tenured superheroes, with a couple of seemingly permanent character deaths thrown into the mix as well. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I had a big cry both times that I saw this film, especially during the final 20 minutes. It just wins, it absolutely wins. I love you 3000, it wins. Number 2, the test of time. Movies don't exist in a vacuum, and though both Infinity War and Endgame were released to rapturous responses from fans, their true worth will be measured by how well they're received in the long term. After all, The Dark Knight continues to be held up as perhaps the greatest superhero movie of all time, though The Dark Knight Rises opened to wide critical acclaim, only to be nitpicked to death once the honeymoon period was over. With its uniquely villain-focused narrative, slick set pieces, and pitch-perfect ending, Infinity War feels like it was always going to endure as an all-time superhero classic. And Endgame won't be far off, but with its larger canvas and sloppier storytelling, it does also feel likely to receive its fair share of backlash in the coming months, especially once the fan-service-infused glow has worn off somewhat. But, and this is a big but, while Infinity War is undeniably smoother, Endgame has the depth to make it hold up on repeat viewings. Endgame's emotional tenor only deepens on repeat viewings, and while it's the one that will be picked to death and prove more divisive in the long run, the risks it took and the depth of the characters and storytelling should see it stand the test of time as a movie. Well, I suppose I've rambled long enough, and I guess it's time to tot up the scores, and for me, Endgame clinches it with 6 wins to Infinity War's 4. Clearly, both movies are terrific achievements in their own right and form part of a larger whole, but honestly, it's going to be down to what kind of superhero romp you're after to decide which one you actually prefer. With its clearer focus and more concise storytelling, Infinity War feels that bit more considered and certainly more of an event at the time. For me though, Endgame is messier and has lower lows than Infinity War, but it also has higher highs and a sense of depth and ambition that's so endearing and satisfying in the long term. Time will tell how fans, critics, and general audiences alike end up viewing the two films, but whichever one becomes your fave, it's clear the Russos did a miraculous job elevating the superhero genre to new heights previously thought impossible. So that's our Endgame vs Infinity War showdown. I obviously erred on the side of Endgame, but what do I know? I'm here as a big banana in pajamas, so I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Which do you prefer, and do you think either will stand the test of time to become one of the superhero genre's all-time greats? Either way, while you're down there, could you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.